And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger there, planet.
Water towers fly! Yes!
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside FD off. Bring in FD off. Off. It's orange!
145! Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. Put that in the big bag, Eagle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together, back to the moon and beyond.
The methane would be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.
Good afternoon. You are taking a live look right now at Falcon 9 on the launch pad at Space Launch Complex 40 at the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where we will try once again to see the launch of Starlink 10-2 with 22 V2 mini satellites. I am Sawyer Rosenstein. I will be your host for this launch attempt. You may remember that they've tried a couple times with this one. The first had issues with weather. The second had an abort after engine ignition. And here we are for today's attempt. Of course, I am not alone. I am joined by a fantastic team of co-hosts with me, including Trevor Sesnick. Trevor, how's it going?
Yeah, I'm doing great. I'm hoping that they can finally get this mission off the ground.
That would be very nice indeed. And I know someone else who really hopes it gets off the ground, and that is our commentator from the field, D Wise. D, how's it going?
Pretty good. I'm definitely hoping this gets off the ground so we can focus on things to come later this week. Been out here for this mission a couple times, got that exciting abort previously, so looking forward to seeing this thing fly.
Yes. Oh, absolutely. So Trevor, for those who might not remember, can you kind of go through what happened on that second launch attempt and how we got to this now, I believe, 9 days later?
Yeah, so I guess it was technically not last week at this point, more than that. SpaceX had a launch attempt of this mission, Starlink Group 10-2, and they had to stand down due to weather. So then they went again the next day. Weather was cooperating, and they had a very rare T0 abort. So we saw all 9 of those Merlin engines attempt to ignite. We saw all of the steam coming out like that they were ignited, and then no liftoff, they shut down. And that was an abort for that day. And then later on X, Kiko, who is the VP of launch at SpaceX, shared this post on X saying, "Tough week dealing with production challenges and then a rare scrub at end startup yesterday on 10-2. Unfortunately, there is a real issue, so we'll need to inspect the hardware in detail on this vehicle. Rocket will get set aside and we'll pivot to SES, which is the mission they launched about 2.5 days ago. And that successfully launched. Pivot are painful, but safety and reliability are priority." And then also talking about how this was the longest that they've been without a Falcon launch in, I think, almost 6 months. So yeah, this booster then, following the scrub, actually completely got changed. So before, if I remember correctly, it was B1073, and now it is B1078. So they obviously must have had some big issue on the booster that they want to go back to the hangar and make sure that it's all fixed and ready for that booster's next launch. So there was a booster change, but hopefully this mission will finally be able to get off the ground.
Yeah, that is very much what we are hoping for at this point. It was honestly a little unusual to see that, a little like scary at first, but thankfully all good for now. And we currently have the booster, as you mentioned, that flew Crew 6 mPOWER B, USSF 124, and 7 Starlink missions. Uh, D, another concern, especially for today, is weather. Can you kind of talk about what the weather is like there currently, what the forecast is, and uh, how how everything's looking as well for recovery downrange? At least what ships are out there.
Yeah, so out here right now, it is cloudy. Nothing too bad. There are not any lightning warnings in our area, thankfully. That was a big concern. Now, their best bet for launching is definitely at the start of the window. The probability of violation at 115, which they are currently targeting, is 50%, and then it goes up to an 80% chance of violation towards the end of the window, with their concerns being the cumulus cloud rule, the surface electric fields rule, and anvil clouds. And there are definitely some anvil clouds up in the area, while there is a little bit of blue uh, overhead. The, there are lots of clouds in the area, so they're definitely going to be keeping an eye on that. Um, Downrange, their booster recovery weather is low, so that's not too much of a concern.
That's a good thing to hear, at least that it's not too much of a concern. So, uh, hopefully, we get to see that launch, and then, of course, hopefully for the safe landing on Shortfall of Gravitas, located downrange. Reminder: if you have any questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do our best to answer as many of them as we can.
I guess,
Uh, yeah, go ahead.
pointing out the drone ship real quick, sorry if I may. Also, drone ship also changed, right? Last week's attempts, it
Yes.
was just read the instructions, then just read the instructions got brought south to support that SES launch. So there's a booster on it now. So they had to get a shortfall of gravitas out.
Yeah, in fact, just came back to port today, which you can always catch on Space Coast Live 24/7. Subtle plug. Uh, we have some support here as well. Wilbo Baggins, right as we were starting the stream, saying, after watching hours and hours of your part in the Spaceport America Cup, you've climbed some rungs. I'm humbled with your collective passion and enthusiasm. I'll work on mine. Oh, trust me, your passion and enthusiasm also comes through in chat because we see your name quite often. So, Wilbo, thank you very much for that. Jedi, thank you for becoming a Padrat member. Lady Rocket, thank you for becoming a Padrat member. John Simpson saying, hi, Barbie. And then Flipper79, this one's for you, Trevor, saying, I may have missed your answer, but how was Flight 4? You did go, no?
Yes, I did go. The sound was phenomenal from especially where I was. It was, I mean, it really did rattle your chest. People always talk about that, and I was kind of assumed it was an exaggeration, but no, it was not. Sadly, as you probably noticed from everyone's coverage, there was just a lot of fog, a lot of clouds. So we saw the vehicle for like 10 minutes, um, or 10 minutes, 10 seconds. Uh, so that part was very disappointing, but hey, all it means is I'll have to go back for flight 5.
Oh, boo hoo, do you have to, right?
Yeah, I know. It's so sad. Do I really have to go again?
Let's see. We have a question here from Rosanna who's asking, is this the only launch today? Well, from Florida? Yes. For SpaceX? No. There is another launch scheduled tonight out of Vandenberg, and that is Starlink Group 9-2. Currently set to launch 11:45 p.m. Eastern, 8:45 p.m. local time there. So we'll see. There's a chance. And of course, the big launch coming up, D, we've got in a couple days, right?
Absolutely, yeah. We have Goes You, uh, which is coming up here for the 25th. That one, really looking forward to with the booster landings, but its weather is not looking too great, somewhat ironically. It it has a 70% chance of violating their weather constraints, and it stays the same if it delays 24 hours.
Yeah. Uh, we hope that that's going to improve at least. So fingers crossed. But As D. Trevor and I were talking about before we went on the air, that's kind of what you get when you plan launches in Florida in the summer, especially in June, for mid to late afternoon. So, fingers crossed, though. And of course, we will be streaming any and all launch attempts. So, hopefully. Let's see here. Here's an interesting question from Vintage Vet Gal. It's not necessarily related to this mission, but I definitely want to address it. Um, Trevor, I'm sure you've been keeping up with it a bit as well with Starliner, saying, do you think they'd launch a Dragon to get the 2 astronauts back, or even a Soyuz with the issues?
Oh boy. Yeah, this is a interesting conversation that's been going on of what exactly is the holdup? Since from what I've read, NASA has said that in case of an emergency, Starliner is cleared to take the crew back to Earth, but then they're wanting to keep the vehicle on station to understand some problems a little bit better or something like that. So my immediate question is what makes it good enough for an emergency return, but not good enough for a regular return? And that's an answer that I don't think NASA has done the best job giving us, or if they have given an answer to that, I have not seen it. Um, so in terms of uh, ways to get the crew back, my guess would probably be that they would want to launch 2 seats up and then take them back down with crew 8 return. But that's a total guess. I certainly am not an expert in this field.
Yeah. From my understanding, from what I've been following since launch day, the main thing, of course, to keep in mind is that the issue primarily is on the service module with the helium leaks and things like that. The service module does not return back to Earth like the rest of the capsule. So they want to get as much information while it's still in space as they can. I think the other main concern is that that is technically what is used for the deorbit burn. However, we've seen that they now currently have not just 3, but an additional 4 different ways now to deorbit Starliner, using different motors, different engines, however many of them they need to fire. All of that can change. So, um, I don't think they will need to do a rescue mission. I think they're going to take the time to learn everything they can, make sure it's 100% safe before they officially go ahead and say, come back home. But I don't think it's as big of a deal as certain uh, news networks and organizations are making it out to be. I'll put it at that. Let's see here. Musical Wolves saying, let's wish upon a Starlink for a liftoff. I was about to sing, but I don't want to get copyright struck. But when you wish upon a Starlink, makes no difference who you are, Link. Um, Alex Vives asking, does anyone know why this booster shut off early last time? And D, I don't think they gave an official answer for this, right?
No, we haven't really gotten a solid answer on that. There was Kiko's tweet that we saw earlier that says that there was a quote real issue, so they need to inspect the hardware, but we really don't know what it was that uh, we don't really know why that booster shut down. But it is worth remembering that this booster is a different one now. They've swapped out the boosters, so they have more time with the one that shut down to work on whatever it is. Of course, it shut down right at engine ignition. So if that's some hardware issue on an engine, we don't have any real details, but that's the best sort of guess we have.
Right. So 1073 is a totally different booster, which they've kind of pushed off to the side a little bit to allow 1078 to take this mission on instead. So this mission did not have an abort in its engines. Just want to confirm that for everyone, make sure that's clear. This one is not the same booster that had the abort, although it is the same payload, just on a different booster. Also, Willow Bag, and thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. So I do want to bring this up again, Trevor, because it always comes up. There's the confusion about it. I mean, the one from Vandenberg is coming up. It's going to be the a 9 mission. This one is a 10 dash. We're still seeing 8 dash. What's the deal with the numbering?
Honestly, at this point, we have no idea. The Starlink Group 10 missions and Group 9 missions seem to be essentially identical. It's like same number of satellites into basically the same initial orbits.
Supposedly to be in order, totally isn't in order, and I know there's some buffering going on, people. So hang tight. Uh, if you can hear us, we're working on it. We will make sure we get you guys back. Seeing a mix of 0x0s and 5x5s. So, Trevor, I think your answer broke the stream. You sure you're not
Haha.
channeling some of that Taylor energy to like break records, break the internet, and now break Starlink stream?
She did break our store once, ironically, because she uses the same provider for her store as we do. And when she had a big release, she broke all of that service, which was impressive.
There we go. All right. Seeing all the 5x5s, always appreciate people helping to let us know that you can indeed hear us. All right. Let's see. Here's a question from BMAT. And D, I'll throw this one to you. Um, they're asking, are the SpaceX flight suits, I'm guessing they mean the suits that they wear during launch, entry, landing, and other major events, are those custom made?
Um, so I believe so. I believe, what was it? Aren't the helmets 3D printed? I'm not too much of an expert on those suits, but they have to be very well fitted to each astronaut. Of course, recently we actually saw with the different suits, the EVA suits, that on an ISS, a spacewalk had to be called off due to discomfort issues. And so it's really important that when you're wearing those suits for an extended period of time that they work well for the astronauts, to put it simply.
And that's what's important, yeah. And one thing I always loved was when it came to like the seats and basically any part that SpaceX designs that is related to one of their astronauts that's custom fit for them, it gets a part number, of course, but the part number includes the astronaut's name. So that way the people working on it basically have in mind that, look, what you're doing is very important. You have someone's life in your hands. Take the time to do it right, do it safely, and bring them back home. I love that. Let's see here. Another question we've got is from Jixjib, I think. Trevor, while we're waiting for Starlink, any quick update on Starship?
Yeah, so I think we're hearing that launch is probably in roughly August now, right? Elon was saying that he posted on X a few days ago, end of July. And I think we've all been watching this program long enough now to, add a month or so, at least a couple of weeks to what Elon says, and that puts us in um, August. This coming week, we're expecting to see the return of some testing. SpaceX's booster B14.1 is expected to be tested this week, and that is going to be their catch test simulator thingy-mabob, which there are road closures for on the 25th, 26th, and 27th from 8 a.m. to 8 p.m.
Fantastic. Also fantastic is that we are go for prop load here. According to a tweet from SpaceX, as you see on your screen, all systems are looking good. Weather is currently 70% favorable, and propellant load is about to begin for today's launch of 22 Starlink satellites from Florida. So that is fantastic news. And in
I
fact,
have some news to go along with this.
yeah, go ahead and share the really cool fact now that we have a chance of hitting.
Yeah, so this will be the quickest turnaround of one of SpaceX's pads to date at 2 days, 19 hours, and 40 minutes. You may be wondering, why didn't I mention this earlier? Because it's only beating the previous record by 20 minutes. The previous record was 2 days, 20 hours. So I wanted to at least have some idea that I wasn't completely jinxing it when uh, I said that fact. And now that I said that, I'm sure I'll somehow jinx it still.
I mean, we'll hope not, but hey, you never know. So as we hit the T minus 38-minute mark, it's actually a key moment in the set of milestones as they get ready to load the vehicle. Oh, excuse me there. So at this point now, they got the go for propellant load, so we should see that beginning in just about 3 minutes from now as they start loading up the RP1, Rocket Propellant 1, which is a refined form of kerosene, as well as LOX, the liquid oxygen, into the first stage. On the second stage, they will just begin loading the RP1. That will continue on until the T minus 20-minute, 20-second vent, where they will condition the lines for the liquid oxygen load to then begin on the second stage. And those will continue all the way till about 2-ish minutes before launch. Here's an interesting question. I don't know if we know the answer to this, but I just want your thoughts on it, Trevor. Six String Simpleton saying, would an engine out on ascent cause an abort for an ISS mission? Don't think so, though, right?
Um, yeah, so not necessarily, I guess, is the answer. Right, SpaceX has demonstrated on numerous occasions at this point that Falcon can handle an engine out on ascent, both in terms of still having the performance to hit the desired orbit, and also in the sense of not being able to cause damage to all of the other engines due to that octaweb structure. So we saw this on one of the early Starlink missions. I think it may have been like Starlink L19 V1.0 L19 or something like that. That may be wrong. Where they lost engine during ascent, late into ascent, and it just shut down as you would expect, and the mission continued as expected. So in that situation, it would not cause an abort. Similarly, even if it was off the pad, it would not cause an abort. The only time it really would cause an abort is if it caused some sort of large damage to the base of the vehicle that would be leading to an explosion of the entire stage. If that was to happen, then the abort system would instantly trigger and take the crew safely away from the vehicle.
And it wouldn't be the first time. I mean, there have been non-crewed launches that have launched, and there was one where they literally had an engine explode mid-flight. This was very early on in the program, but it still made it safely to orbit. So it's very doable. Obviously, you don't want that to happen, but Falcon 9's a pretty strong, pretty reliable, pretty tough rocket. It can do it if need be. We will keep an eye now on that rocket as we hit under the T minus 35-minute mark, meaning propellant load should be underway. So we will look very closely now for the frost, hopefully starting to form on the vehicle. Here's a question from Michael Bertoldi. And D, I'll put this one to you. You've seen a bunch of Starlink launches. Do we know if there's any difference in the Starlinks to have to communicate with the Minis antenna? So the ones that were already up there, the V1.5s, they can talk with the V2 Minis, right?
Yeah, so the Starlinks, all of them with the laser links will be able to communicate with each other at high speed. And that's what allows stuff like the maritime service, so that cruise ships out in the middle of the ocean, nowhere near a ground station, they can hop from satellite to satellite, whether it's V2 Mini, the previous ones with the satellite interconnects. They can all communicate with each other to hop to the nearest satellite that can reach down to one of the ground stations. And that's also, those laser interconnects are how, like, Dragon will be able to have Starlink, and potentially those interconnects would unlock the possibility for I mean, I've seen questions before about, like, if the ISS could get Starlink or things like that. While that's not in the books or anything like that, that is how other satellites or other spacecraft would be able to communicate them. It would be through those laser interconnects. Yeah.
Yeah, and as we've seen even from the last Starship flight with the giant live via Starlink parts at the top of the screen, uh, they can communicate with Starship as it re-enters. In addition, as you mentioned, to say ships in the middle of the ocean, all thanks to lasers.
I think the question may have been about the new mini dish that SpaceX announced,
Oh, okay.
um,
But you
and
want to
not
take
the
that part
mini
then?
satellites. Sure. Um, so it's still a phased array antenna. So it doesn't use so the lasers that D is talking about, right? Those are used to connect the satellites together, as they were saying, to go from satellite to satellite. But then to actually communicate with the user dish, it's a phased array antenna, which is basically it's a steerable antenna, but nothing actually moves. So instead, they just modulate the phase of signals throughout various different antennas on this dish. So then, since you have a flat surface and a bunch of different antennas based on the constructive and destructive interference, you can actually steer without moving anything exactly where that wave is going to go, which is just tremendously cool technology, in my opinion. It's nothing novel, but it certainly is the first time it's used really in a commercial application. Um, and so that's how they're able to communicate with each satellite. And my understanding is that's the same with the smaller dish. It's just that the dish will be less powerful, so therefore the load and download speeds will be a bit slower. Although based on the numbers that Michael, I think is his name, the Starlink VP, shared on X, it still seems to have very, very good speeds, especially if it's a backup solution or whatnot. I think he shared it was like 120 megabits per second up and fairly similar down. So it's a very, very cool product that they have released.
I'm excited to see that and just people carrying it in a backpack. Like, oh yeah, I got my Starlink on me. And then add in once you get the direct to cell too. Oh, that's going to be talk about connectivity. Now, I don't know about you, but I'm craving cake. You know why? Because the rocket is frosting. Haven't had a pun yet. It's a Sunday. I had to. There is frost indeed now that we can see visible on the Falcon 9 booster there, confirming fueling is indeed underway. And as we last saw, the percentage of weather go per SpaceX is 70% favorable. So we like hearing that as we hit the T minus 30-minute mark. Now, one thing I realized that we haven't talked about yet, as we are now under half hour away, is I'm sure there's people out there that really want to see it. I mean, we have a message here from the fantastic RC Horseman saying, at Playa Linda to watch this. Thanks again for the great coverage. Well, thank you for your support through all of this and watching us while you're out there at Playa Linda and gifting 5 Red Team memberships while you're out there too. But that brings up the good question, D, of what's the trajectory for this one?
Yeah, so this one is going to be heading northeast off the coast of Florida. So sort of run parallel to the coast of Georgia, and it'll move up. So if this were a night launch, it would be providing those views of the second stage all along the upper US. But yeah, Playa Linda is an excellent place to be to to watch a launch out of 40 or 39A. That's a great view. But yeah, so this we used to get a lot of northeast trajectory launches, and then with the previous group, they were going more south, and now we're getting some northeast launches again.
We love to see that. And yep, so for this one, the booster is also positioned about 625-ish kilometers downrange. Fairing recovery will happen about 700 kilometers downrange in that yellow polygon that you see on there. And then the second stage, as we expect, will also uh, intentionally destroy itself, basically burn up, and that will happen on this part of the map that you see here, right along the southern part of Australia, extending to just before New Zealand and slightly above the South Pole. Let's see here. Coco Cats, thank you for gifting a Red Team membership. And Wilbo Baggins asking, is Jack back? Uh, no, we can't pull him away from New Zealand. I don't know what happened to him, if he got lost in a hobbit hole, but I believe he's still there. Let's see here. Reminder, if you have questions, you can tag us at NASA Spaceflight, and we will do the best we can to answer them. Here is a question from Kelly, and I'm going to put this one back to you, D, because we are looking at pad 40 right now, and I believe from where you are, you can also see pad 39A ahead of the Falcon Heavy launch scheduled for Tuesday. How's it looking, and do we know when the ship will go vertical out there?
The pad is looking quite empty. Yeah, I'm at the press site, so in order, I can see on the far right Slick 40, Slick 41, 39A, and 39B. And on 39A, I do not see a transporter erector or a rocket out there. So they've gotten pretty fast with their ability to go vertical and then launch. So we could especially without having a static fire or anything like that, uh, they could roll out like the morning of the launch to go vertical. I'm not certain when they actually plan to, but it's an empty pad right now, and I look forward to seeing a 3-core rocket up there again soon.
Exactly. And I think one thing you mentioned there that's important is, yeah, the pad is empty, including the TE, the transporter erector. That's a good thing. That means it is inside the horizontal integration facility, or HIF, where they mate all of the boosters and everything together for Falcon Heavy and the GOES-U satellite. So they're getting it ready to roll out. That means that the next time we see the TE roll out, it should have the launch vehicle on it. Uh, let's see. Here's a question from Ryan, a Geo, also asking some similar questions, saying, I'm visiting Florida this week, planning on taking my son to the Falcon Heavy launch. What are great spots for viewing? Love the channel. Same from Geo Clip, saying they're also visiting Florida and planning on seeing Falcon Heavy. Any good viewing ideas? Uh, my suggestions for this one in particular is uh, it depends on whether you really want to see the launch or if you want to see the landing. If Playa Linda Beach is open for this launch, it's going to be fantastic for viewing there. If not, you'll get great views, I think, anywhere along US 1 in Titusville for that. Cars Park would be absolutely spectacular for this one as well. And if you're coming in particular for the double booster landing and want that to be the main focus, you can go somewhere along the lines of Jetty Park or any of those beaches, Sherry Down, right along the Cocoa Beach area. If all of that is a little confusing and you want it simplified for you, we do have a video on the channel about how to view a rocket launch. So you could always check that out on the channel. I'm sure someone will be able to, from the moderator team, will be able to spam that link in chat so that everyone gets to see that and check it out. Here's a question. Canyon asking, and Trevor, I'll put this one to you. What does it take, and why does it take so long to change the pad for a Falcon Heavy? Why not do it to other pads on the West Coast? Like, I know they now have Slick 6.
Yeah, that's a good question. So there's just a lot of small changes that needs to be made for these Falcon Heavy launches. So, for example, they need to remove some of the rainbirds that are on the sides of Falcon 9. Um, then they need to make changes to the TE so that it can fuel 3 boosters as opposed to just a single booster. Um, so it's just all of these changes and a changing of the reaction frame and all of or making changes to the reaction frame. It just takes a little bit of time. And I'm sure it's a process that SpaceX does want to drastically speed up since it does seem like it takes quite some time. Um, so I would bet going forward we'll see them attempting to quicken this process, but as of right now, it still takes about a week and a half to 2 weeks on either end to turn the pad or to get the pad from Falcon 9 configuration to Falcon Heavy configuration.
I think it's also important to note that there currently aren't that many uh, Falcon Heavy launches currently scheduled too. So it's not like
Yeah,
it's the highest priority for them to speed up the turnaround time for that. I think they'd rather be able to have the quick turnaround times for Falcon 9 so that they can hit that 144/148 mission count that they're targeting for this year. Be able to just go, all right, let's launch from 40. Okay, now we can do 39A and back and forth.
yep.
Uh, let's see here. Um, I don't know if you know the answer to this, Trevor, but Tommy Time is asking, can Falcon change what engines it uses for the reentry burn if they use one of the normally
Nope.
used engines on Ascent?
No, so only 3 of the engines, E1, E5, and E9, have what's called a T-tab canister, and as that name implies, that's what holds the T-tab, the ignition fluid for those 3 engines. Uh, None of the other engines have that, so therefore they're not capable of this restart. So you may be wondering, if only 3 of these engines have T-tab canisters, how can they ignite the engines on the ground? And I'd say, terrific question. On the ground, all of the T-tab is provided by the ground service equipment, so it's not stored on the vehicle. So once it's off the pad, 6 of those engines are not capable of restart.
There you go. And we've kind of seen that happen on other missions where if things go wrong, at that point, then they kind of just end up uh, splashing it down in the ocean as far away as possible from the drone ship as well as the landing zones if that's where they're going to try and preserve them and not have to then rebuild them all. And one thing that they will have to do as well with Falcon 9 is prepare the lines for the next type of propellant load that's about to happen. And that happens with the best vent, the T minus 20-minute, 20-second vent. And as we hit that point in the countdown, you can kind of see it there, right around that black portion of the rocket in the middle there. We have the famous vent. Well, chill down. D, do you mind telling us what this is?
Yeah, so they are cooling down the lines to prepare for the propellant to flow into the second stage. Um, they're running liquid oxygen to prepare, or they're preparing for the liquid oxygen to flow into the second stage. And of course, with that super cooled uh, fluid, as it cools down the air, it causes a lot of condensation, which is what we are seeing.
There you go. Yep. Getting it because the RP1 is a lot warmer than the liquid oxygen. So get those lines nice and ready. And this will happen for about 4 minutes or so. And around the T minus 16-minute mark is when we should see the loading begin of the liquid oxygen on stage 2. Again, noted by the stopping of said venting. Meanwhile, first stage continues to be loaded with both RP1 and liquid oxygen. By the way, Flipper79 Flip Diaz says Mike 5, DY's 2. I'm not sure if that means anything to you, D, but thank you for the support there. Let's see here. Johan M. Trevor, this goes back to the numbering again. What happened to Starlink 666? I really would have loved that one for obvious reasons. No cheating for Adrian. What's with the skipping numbers here, other than just to confuse us, right?
We have no idea. Um, so some of the missions in the past that they have skipped over have been for when the mission was going to have a secondary payload on it. And then they decided to, or there was a delay or whatever in the secondary payload. And since all of the FCC applications and whatnot were with that additional payload, they would need to just wait for that specific number to launch for when that payload launches. But since we haven't seen any Starlink missions recently with additional payloads, we're kind of wondering if it's possible with Starlink V2 Mini, and it very well could be that SpaceX started up the bandwagon series of missions because V2 made it not possible for them to just do on Starlink launches. We're not entirely sure. It could just be some weird numbering system SpaceX has internally that makes sense if you know everything that's going on. But we don't know. It could also be possible that Starlink Group 6 launches are over. We'll just have to wait and see.
Right, as they move on to 8, 9, and 10, even though they don't tell us what the 10 shell exactly is and everything. So yeah, uh, the joys of Starlink launches. Pick a number, any number, and there's probably a launch with it. Here's a good question. JS Webb asking, is the fairing painted black? And Trevor, I don't think it's painted. I think it's just a little sooty, right?
Yeah, right. SpaceX, basically every mission at this point has flight-proven fairing halves, and this mission is no exception. So, unfortunately, SpaceX no longer gives us how many times each fairing half has flown. SpaceX, if you're listening, please, 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 please give us that. So that's not. Uh, that is not paint, it is just soot. Probably, my guess would be a lot of that comes from when they fall away from the MVAC, or when they fall away from the second stage, just a little bit of soot from the MVAC. But also, there's a chance that some of it is from the entry, just a little bit of heating. But they're regularly reflying these fairing halves. I believe the most we've been told they've flown a single half is 16 times. And then the quickest turnaround is I believe SpaceX said around 2 weeks, a little over 2 weeks. So SpaceX's fairing recovery program has been tremendously successful. And I really wish they would give us more information so that we could track each individual half like we used to be able to.
Yeah, that would be nice. I mean, occasionally if it's a major milestone, they'll mention it later, but it's again usually later, at which point it's like, "Oh, that would have been cool to talk about." But yeah. Let's take some more questions while we're going here. Uh Ninja Guy Dan asking, does SpaceX paint Starlink satellites with a substance such as Vantablack to make the satellites nearly invisible to astrophotographers? Uh, D, they've definitely dimmed these, haven't they?
Yeah, so they've gone through a number of different methods in order to decrease the brightness. Um, Not necessarily Vanta Black, but they did have a dark paint that they had used. And I believe another part of it is actually by having the surface be, it's somewhat counterintuitive, but by having a surface be more mirror-like reflective and less just like matte white, then it'll reflect light in a more very narrow direction. So by controlling the direction on the reflective surfaces, they can make it so that the light that bounces off of them misses the Earth. So they have done some white papers and shared a couple different updates on their efforts to decrease the brightness. Of course, it's not perfect if you're going out in the night sky, especially when these satellites are going through like orbit raising. You'll still see trains of them at times if it's after sunset and the light reflects off them. I want to say properly, but if it reflects off them in the perfect orientation, they'll still be nice and bright in the sky, but they've gone through a number of iterations to decrease the brightness of the satellites to have less of an impact on astrophotography.
Yeah, I mean, you still see them, but it's a lot better than it used to be from the early ones. Here's a really good question, Trevor, uh, from Giant, and I know you love the Merlin engines. So they're asking, with so many launches and landings under their belt, why do you think SpaceX has not improved the efficiency of Merlins to always do an RTLS?
Uh, it's definitely more complex than that. So keep in mind, right, the Merlin engine is an open cycle engine. And that inherently means that you're going to be a little bit less efficient. I guess on the order of a little under 10% less efficient than cycle alternatives. And one of the reasons why SpaceX hasn't gone ahead and done that, make Merlin closed cycle, is just because why do it at this point? It's not the right architecture for a fully reusable vehicle. And SpaceX realized this and thought, okay, we just need to move on. We've learned an absolute ton from the Falcon program. We need to move on to a clean sheet design, both in terms of propulsion, but also just vehicle in general. And that was what eventually became Starship. So it really just came to the point of it's not worth it. And to answer the second part of your question, even if they made all of these changes to Falcon, um, it wouldn't be able to do RTLS on every mission. Um, right? RP1 is just inherently somewhat inefficient. But then also, Falcon launches very, very massive payloads. So if you want RTLS on every mission, you're just not going to be able to launch a lot of missions, right? For Starlink missions, since those go to low Earth orbit, you have to do, you would be able to just cut back some satellites. But for other missions like GTO, geostationary transfer orbit missions, like the SES mission, they just wouldn't be able to launch that payload if they mandated that the booster did RTLS, even if they did massive efficiency gains to the Merlin. So it just it doesn't it wouldn't make sense for them to do it.
Yeah, and I mean, we've seen some improvements for sure. The fact that they were able to slowly increase the number of satellites of the V1.5s over time, to be able to carry more of them, they've definitely improved the efficiency. It's just sometimes it's more efficient to not have to turn all the way back around, do the flip and burn. Well, not the flip burn, that's Starship. To do the boost back burn and then come all the way back and land when you can literally just kind of keep it on its ballistic trajectory for the most part and then just slowly lower your speed and land on the drone ship. And they've gotten so fast at turning those drone ships around at this point too that I think in a way that's even more efficient. And also, uh, kind of props to the Merlin engines and of course, the recovery teams. We are now under 10 minutes away. D, I know you've probably got some cameras and things you need to set up there, so can we just get one final weather check from you and we'll let you get ready for launch?
Sure thing. Yeah, it is looking a little bit better. There's some more blue skies closer to the pad. I'll send a wide photo that can be shared here shortly. Still lots of clouds overhead, but it's not too bad. Looking forward to this thing getting off the ground.
And looking forward to seeing your fantastic views, both in real time and slow motion. So, D, will check back in with you after the launch.
See you then.
All right. As we hit the T minus 9 minute mark here, uh, here's a good question from Oscar Wilder. They're asking Trevor, can SpaceX produce any of its own cryogenics on site yet?
Ooh, um, no. So, right, SpaceX was making that air liquidification center at Starbase a few years ago, and then they promptly scrapped it. Um, so they're not doing that at Starbase at this point, and instead just trucking in all of the propellant. The same is true for Falcon. At all of its pads, they're not producing on site. They get it from, I believe, some of it comes from Air Liquide, but I'm not sure who all of the suppliers are. Um, but that said, one thing that will happen is we've seen in the environmental assessment that's going on for Starship at the Cape right now, SpaceX is wanting to produce it on site for that and, make methane and liquid oxygen and liquid nitrogen purely from things in the air. So, uh, right now, no. But in the near future, assuming this environmental assessment passes, SpaceX should be able to do it here in Florida for Starship.
That's the hope, because as of right now, for a Falcon, uh, I believe, if I recall correctly, yes, with Air Liquide, they get their propellants from Jacksonville as well as West Palm Beach. So they still truck it in. And yes, there is like an Air Liquide plant right along State Road 3 near the Cape, but those come in from other parts of the state. We are coming up now on the T minus 7 minute mark, and we reach another milestone in the countdown for those Merlin engines once again. Uh, we are coming up on the sort of chill down of these engines, right?
Yeah, so at this point, SpaceX will be flowing a little bit of propellant through all 9 of those engines on the first stage to cool them down ahead of ignition at T minus 2.7 seconds. So this is done since that liquid oxygen is at about negative 210 centigrade. Um, when that starts flowing at full force at that ignition point, you really don't want that engine to be ambient temperature. That would cause it to instantly, as soon as it touches that metal, it would instantly boil off, becoming a gas, obviously increasing its volume. So then you can have a bunch of damage done to the engine. This is one way that an engine can do what's called a hard start. And you can also get a ton of cavitation on all of the turbines and whatnot from this happening. So to avoid this, SpaceX gets it ensures that the engine is substantially cooler than ambient temperature for that engine ignition.
And that should be underway as we speak, reaching the 5.5 minute mark here in today's countdown. Hopefully, we will see the launch of the Starlink 10-2 mission, which, for those of you just joining as we hit the 5 minute mark here, this is Space Launch Complex 40, Cape Canaveral Space Force Station, where Falcon 9 Booster 1078 is set to launch 22 Starlink V2 mini satellites on the 10-2 mission. This mission had previously had an abort about 9 days ago after engine ignition. After setting that aside, they decided to change out the booster entirely. So this originally was going to launch on B1073, but as mentioned, this booster on your screen is B1078. Once it launches, they will hopefully be able to land the booster on a shortfall of gravitas located a little over 600 kilometers to the northeast of the launch site. And Doug, I believe, is out and ready to help recover the fairings about 700 kilometers away. Now at T minus 4.5 minutes, we should be coming up on the retraction of the strong back. Well, there's the confirmation of it. A whole whopping 1.8 degrees. Why, Trevor?
Yeah, so right, the reason why the strong back wants to get out of the way is that it's as far away from the flamey bit of Falcon 9 during ascent to minimize damage to it. So by swinging away from the vehicle, there can get far away from the flame, making refurbishment time lower. But you may be thinking, 1.8 degrees does not sound like a lot, and I would agree with you on that. So this new strongback design was made in a way such that at this point it just retracts by 1.8 degrees, but then after engine ignition and the vehicle lifts off, it swings back way further to past 45 degrees away. So it's almost, maybe it's like 30 or so degrees from horizontal. Um, so that just helps make sure that it is protected. And this is not the same as what happened, say, at Vandenberg at Slick 4 East, where SpaceX still has the old style of TE, which does not do this throwback maneuver. So instead, it just retracts by, I can never remember the exact value, but I want to say roughly 20 degrees.
Yeah, so you will see the throwback maneuver of the transporter right to the strong back once we get right before liftoff. Under 3 minutes now until the scheduled
Stage one,
T0
box
time
load
for this
complete.
mission. And you can hear them completing some of the propellant loads on board the vehicle. And that venting that we're seeing there is completely normal. And in fact, where you should be expecting one more big vent, right, Trevor?
Yes, that is correct. So at the end, once all of the propellant has been loaded onto the vehicle, they will do a final purge of those lines to ensure that there is as minimal liquid oxygen and RP1 in them as possible. So that will be done with a purge, which will be seen as a bunch of gas, like large clouds of gases coming from the TE, and that is liquid nitrogen cleaning out all of those lines.
So yes, when we see that, that is completely
Stage
normal.
two,
And
box load
even though
complete.
and that is the completion of liquid oxygen on stage 2, so we should be seeing that vent any moment now. So everything continuing on track as we now approach almost 90 seconds away from liftoff. We have a few major events that will be coming up once we hit the T-minus 1 minute mark. That will be Falcon 9 entering startup, meaning the onboard computers will take control of the countdown up to that point.
Ground
That
gas
is also
closeout.
when they will pressurize all of the tanks on board to their final flight pressures, and then hopefully we get the go for launch at T-minus 45 seconds from the launch director. And there is the T-minus 1 minute mark, and Falcon 9 entering startup, pressurizing the flight pressures, and we should get confirmation of that
Falcon
in
9
just a
is in
few
startup.
seconds. Here we go. Falcon 9 is in startup. The next call will hopefully be a go for launch.
Go for launch.
There it is. We are ready to go here, coming up on 30 seconds now until liftoff. I promise we will stop talking and commentating once we have the launch happen so you can enjoy the sounds. Just keep in mind, it does take a bit of time for it to reach our microphones a couple miles away. So it will start off quiet, but promise the sound will hit you, that's for sure. 10 seconds now. We'll keep an eye out for the T-Tab helping to ignite those 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the rocket. There's ignition and liftoff of Starlink 10-2. Go, Internet Satellites V2. Go. sound on that one. Goodness gracious. T plus 1 minute 40 seconds into flight. Again, our clock, more real time is a slight delay from the SpaceX feed, but Falcon 9 punching through the clouds there. Absolutely beautiful. The sound, stunning. Hear those VAB squeals as well. And we now have a record for the fastest turnaround time at any SpaceX launch pad, beating the previous record by 20 minutes. We'll be coming up on 3 events now in quick succession. First will be MECO, main engine cutoff, when they'll shut down those 9 Merlin 1D engines, followed by the separation of the first and second stages, and then that will be followed very shortly after that by the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on stage 2. So let's stand by for that.
Go.
There's MECO.
Stage separation confirmed.
There it is. We can see it as well. And we should have MVAC ignition.
Recognition.
There we go. Once again, no stiffener ring and a regular-sized Merlin vacuum nozzle as opposed to the stubby nozzle. And on the left side, the grid fins unfolding. Trevor, this is
Fairing
that
separation confirmed.
audio as we
There
see on
go
the
the
right side of your
fairings.
screen. The fairings fall away.
Yeah, that audio was remarkable. That was enjoyable to listen to.
See the fairing has falling away on that right screen there. Those, again, will land in the water, be scooped up, brought back to the Port Canaveral area, and refurbished to be flown again on a future Falcon 9 mission. So, can you kind of walk us through, Trevor, now, as we hit the 3.5 minute mark into flight, kind of what we can expect for the next 5 minutes of flight here?
Sure. So let's start with the second stage on the right, since that's easy. That Merlin vacuum engine is just going to keep burning until just over 8 minutes after launch. And that will take the Starlink satellites and the second stage into an initial orbit. In that initial orbit, they will then coast for on the order of
Those vehicles are on a
45-ish
nominal
minutes.
trajectory.
Good call out that both vehicles are following a nominal trajectory, what we like to hear. And that initial orbit will cause they'll just coast in that initial orbit for about 45 minutes before performing a very short relight of that Merlin vacuum engine to somewhat circularize the orbit and raise its apogee to be in that roughly 270 by 290 kilometer orbit. On the left-hand side of the screen, the first stage, B1078, will continue heading toward a shortfall of gravitas. To do this, as usual on these Starlink missions, it will be performing 2 burns. The first of those burns will start at about 60 kilometers above sea level on that entry burn timeline you can see in the bottom. That will be 3 engines as always, so it'll start up with just the single center engine, E9, and then after that, side engines E1 and E5 will follow, and that burn will last a little over 20 seconds before shutting down. And then at that point, the booster will have lost a substantial portion of its velocity. Then, after that, the booster will continue descending until its landing burn, and that landing burn, again, as usual for these Starlink missions, single engine. So it'll be that single center engine that will hopefully take the booster to a soft touchdown on a shortfall of gravitas.
There we go, and we will be coming up on that first burn here very shortly. That is the entry burn, fighting fire with fire, basically, to help slow the vehicle down.
Those vehicles continue
As
to
it
follow
goes
a
through.
nominal trajectory.
Sawyer, I guess SpaceX comms were listening to us because we just
Yes.
got confirmation 20 flights of today's fairing half. Wow.
Yes, one half has now flown for the 20th time, which is the first for SpaceX. So, wondering why it was
Stage 1
actually
entry burn startup. Stage 1
very,
FTS has safed.
very gray and sooty. That would be why. Also gray and sooty right now will be the Falcon 9 booster, as during this entry burn, as we mentioned, it's fighting fire with fire, and as it goes through its own exhaust plume, it is burning RP1, which is carbon-based. Carbon-based means soot, and that is how the boosters get super
Stage
sooty
1 entry
for
burn
each of these
shutdown.
launches. That burn looked good. It will now continue to do its final steering towards a shortfall of gravitas, about 600 or so kilometers downrange from where it first launched, and hopefully land safely on that. But geez, 20 fairing halves. That is unbelievable. And
Yeah,
Trevor,
that
do you have that
is.
number, by the way, of the record turnaround time now with this launch?
Oh, of the pad turnaround?
Yes.
Yes, it was 2 days, 19 hours, and 40 minutes. So the previous was 2 days and 20 hours between Starlink Group 648 and 649.
And this one was between the Astra 1P/SES mission and Starlink 10-2.
Stage 1 transonic.
Here we go, stage 1 transonic. You can see there in the bottom left the speed and altitude data for that booster. Now 5 kilometers off the deck, going at about 1,000 kilometers an hour, and hopefully in just about 20 seconds or so it'll be at 0.
Stage 2 is
There
internal
we go.
guidance. Stage 1 landing burn.
You can see the drone ship there underneath as the grid fins help steer in the thicker parts of the atmosphere.
Stage 1 landing leg deploy. Stage 2 FTS has safed.
And touchdown. I love that you could actually hear the landing burn on that one, but now B-1078 standing tall after
Stage
its
1 landing
11th
confirmed.
launch and landing.
And
Impact
that
check.
marks SpaceX's 321st booster landing and 247th consecutive.
Fantastic. And it looks like we had SECO, which is the second engine cutoff. So that is the Merlin vacuum engine shutting down. And based off of the numbers, everything looked pretty darn good. D, do we have you back?
Yes, you do. I am here on my laptop editing some slow motion footage to share with you.
Do you have a quick second just to talk about the sound on that one? Because that seemed unbelievable this time.
Absolutely. It was, I mean, I've got to be honest, this time I kept both of my AirPods in to listen into the commentary, and I regret that because this sound lasted such a long time, and it kept crackling as I was hearing like fairing deployment. I was still hearing the crackle from the sound reaching an excellent VAV squeal. Like I have absolutely no complaints about the sound this time around. It was gorgeous to hear and see as long as we could see it.
Yeah, we will get a replay of that launch coming up here. Those are in work, so we'll have those for you very soon. But yes, that VAV squeal, which is a staple from a launch from Pad 40 or a landing at LZs 1 and 2, where the resonance just happens to work out just right between the Merlin engines and the panels on the side of the vehicle assembly building that rattle in such a way that it sounds like a squealing noise. So if you heard that, that's what that was. And again, this isn't your ordinary Starlink. We can definitely say that now with that turnaround time, and now with the fact that we have a 20th flight fairing half as well. So that is absolutely just so cool after all this time. I do want to thank some support that we got right before launch. Ninja Decimator. Pew, pew, pew. Thank you for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. And Joe Howard, thank you as well for gifting 5 Red Team memberships. So, yeah, Frank, who's asking, do we have the intel on the most amount of times fairings have flown so far? We do now. 20. which it's unbelievable, and it showed. You could kind of tell, Trevor, right?
Yeah, it was certainly a very sooty fairing half, so that's awesome to hear. And I did go back and find the X post where SpaceX was talking about the quickest fairing half turnaround, which, just to emphasize, this was not on today's launch, but as of March of this year, the quickest fairing half had been reflown in 25 days. So my guess at this point is that both in terms of number of launches and also in terms of turnaround times, booster and fairing seem to be pretty similar. Of right, fairing has now flown 20 times, boosters 21, and then the quickest of each being in the mid 20 days. So um, I guess going forward, we can try to, when SpaceX doesn't necessarily give us uh, all of this information, we can guess based on boosters, since we thankfully do have a good idea for those.
Exactly. And I do want to apologize to anyone that got ads during that launch. We have them set to not do it, but sometimes YouTube just ignores that anyway. So hopefully everyone got to enjoy the launch. And if not, can rewind and check it out again because the sound on that was unbelievable. Let's see here now. So even though we don't see the Starlink satellites anymore, they still have a whole nother burn to do too, right?
Yes, that is correct. So at about T plus 45 minutes or so, that burn, the second stage will do another burn lasting just over a second. It is a very, very short burn to help rid the apogee, and that will take them to that planned roughly 270 by 290 kilometer orbit. Uh,
And yep, then we will hopefully see the deploy of that. Now, one thing that we can deploy are replays of the launch. Jay, if you wouldn't mind pulling those up, please. Let's see it again. This from one of our robotic cameras at the Kennedy Space Center press site there. You should see the rocket popping up right over the tree line. It almost felt like it was super kind of slow motion, and these are the regular speed ones. We haven't gotten to the slow motion yet, but I don't know. It kind of felt like Falcon was just taking its time with this one, which helped with the audio, but just kind of hanging there, like, yeah, you, you like watching, right? So I'm just gonna take it nice and slow until I end up at a final velocity of 17,500 miles an hour.
And this launch, I filmed the slow at an even higher frame rate, so it's even slower motion. So it really looks like the rocket is just hanging there in the sky. I can't wait till we show that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some launches feel faster than others, and this one definitely felt on the slower side, which isn't a bad thing, especially since it made it to orbit. That's the most important thing. There she goes. Now, for those of you that didn't hear the sound, we have this one, which I believe should have some fantastic audio. So hopefully we'll get to that. Listen in. You can see also at the moment the before and after on the screen, basically. So hang on, it takes a second for the sound, but again, that throwback there, gotta love it. There it goes. Beautiful. And it looked a little bit cloudy from our vantage point, but as you saw, there was quite a bit of blue. D with a fantastic track, by the way, on this. Hey, Trevor, this doesn't get old, does it?
no, it really doesn't. I think, honestly, the fact of how many of these are going is in some ways makes it cooler since it becomes like tracking all the stats and you can try out different vantage points and all the photographers can try different shots that may or may not work. And if it doesn't work out, well, there's another Starlink launch in a few days.
Yeah. And in this case, again, for SpaceX, they have another launch that will be scheduled for later today. So they have a launch out of Vandenberg Space Force Base from Slick 4 East. That is set to launch 11:45 p.m. Eastern, 8:45 p.m. local time. And this the view from the auto track, the camera that keeps track of the rocket on the way up. So it's a little bit on the shakier side, but it doesn't get old. That does not get old. And we have the slow motion coming up as well, so hang in there. And yes, realize that when the other one didn't have sound, it got cut a little bit short. But here's the slow motion. And D, you said this was extra slow. How slow are we talking here?
So normally I just do a higher resolution and 120 frames a second. This time I cut down the resolution a bit to film the whole thing at 240 frames a second, which isn't too terribly slow, but you can see for a rocket launch from this far away, it really just hangs there.
It just hangs there as an understatement looking at that. My goodness. Also, great shot. You can see D there actually filming and tracking. Which, D, thank you for rolling out, by the way, and hanging out there and finally getting to see 10-2 take off.
Of course, I'm always happy to be out here.
Alex pointing out you could see the hair flapping in the wind that slow. That's kind of cool. And now we cut to it further up in flight. I don't know how you do it, D, but it's still very impressive.
Thank you.
And as we continue to watch the replay there, I believe the Strongback has gone back to its upright position, if I'm not mistaken. Right, Trevor?
Yes, that is correct. As you can see in the live view at the right, the TE was, just over 45 degrees away, and now it's kind of hidden. It's back vertical, so that's what we want to see. That's what means SpaceX has already started preparation for their next launch. So they'll bring that TE down, pick up the reaction frame, and take it all to the hangar for integration of the next payload for the next rocket, which I am not sure what mission is
It's about,
next from 40. I think it's
I believe it's got 4
10-3.
days from now, and that will be 10-3.
Okay, it is 10-3 for once in order.
Yeah, that's currently June 27th, just before 7 a.m. But Trevor, thank you for joining me on this one. Appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. It's been fun. I'm glad this mission got off the ground. And again, like Sawyer said, another Starlink launch tonight, which we won't be covering, but then a Falcon Heavy on Tuesday. So it's an exciting time.
It really is. And don't forget to check out everything on social media there. You could see all of our individual handles, but make sure you also check out NSF on X/Twitter, whichever you prefer to call it, Facebook, Instagram, even on TikTok somehow. But we're on all the socials there. Have to give a huge shout out to Jay for operating today's stream behind the scenes, pushing the buttons, pulling the levers, bringing the views to you. I have been your host, Sawyer Rosenstein. Once again, we have Falcon Heavy coming up, but there is still another stream. We have the Intrepid Museum stream coming up this afternoon, just about an hour and a half from now. And a little Sawyer flex here. It is one of my favorite astronauts who I've met a bunch of times who wishes me happy birthday every year. But Brett Hayes coming up on Astro Live. So make sure you set a reminder. Check that out coming up in just a little bit as well. Thank you everyone for watching, and we will see you next time.
And here we go. We have liftoff.
Propulsion continues to be nominal.
R68 chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger, roger, planet.
Tango down to nominal.
Flight downside SPD off. Bring in SPD off. It's orange!
Oh my god! Oh my god!
Decollage. What is it? Put that in the big bag, Jingle.
343 unfolds to go.
Indeed.
We rise together back to the moon and beyond.
This methane will be igniting in the flare, correct?
Yikes. You dead? Sure. We don't need any more of these.